Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm so glad to have you here today. I'm your host, Juliet Clark. So I want to remind you before we get started to go over and take our Promote, Profit, Publish quiz. You can find that at www.promoteprofitpublishquiz.com. And also go over and subscribe to us over on YouTube. You can see all of these. If you're listening on podcast and you want to actually see some of our guests, all of the videos are over there and you can see them talking with me, just kind of gabbing and being their normal self. See, like our guest right now is drinking her coffee. So is it coffee or tea? Tea. She's such a tea drinker. I think you're about to find out why too. So my guest today is actually one of my clients. Her name is Brooke Walker, and Brooke has over 20 years experience as a business leader in the areas of management, law firms, health, and leadership. Her experience in psychology, finance, and healthcare industries have made her an asset to businesses and the holistic views she brings. Brooke has spent more than a decade teaching, speaking, achieving sales goals, and leading in these fields. She is the founder of the 100 Years of Bliss. You probably guessed that from what's going on behind her there. 100 Years of Bliss is a wellness company focusing on culture and health of other companies. And today, her passion is to empower, educate, and advise companies on the benefits of meditation and mindfulness and how those two things increase health, productivity, sales, and the bottom line. So welcome, Brooke.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So one of the groups that you work with are attorneys. And so should we make a couple lawyer jokes before we go, or, should we do that to get started? Like, hey, I'll be here all week. But the reason I'm mentioning that is it's such a high pressure business. So can you talk a little bit about why attorneys? Why would you want to hang out with attorneys?
One of the things I say is, I actually love attorneys, which is not something most people say. And I think it's because most people haven't seen what the average attorney goes through, especially the amount of stress that they take on a day-to-day basis. And I grew up in that. So you could actually say I was like cutting my teeth on my dad's law books because I was born right as my dad was taking the bar. And then even when I was a teenager, I started working for my dad, and he used to take me to law libraries, and he would put reporters in front of me and have me start reading things. And he's like, okay, I want you to tell me read this and then tell me what it means and summarize it for me, and I would read them, and half the time I just fell asleep on them.
Well, yeah, I was going to say your dad sounds like a really fun guy. Yeah, let's blow off Disneyland today and go to a law library.
So what really actually made me want to work with attorneys is seeing my dad work the way that he worked. And it's the fact that attorneys have a really difficult time turning that off. So it's not that I want to help them what I do will help them become better attorneys, but I want to help them become better parents, become better spouses, become better day-to-day parts of their community, not just better lawyers, because that's the part that it's the balance of it all. And attorneys are burning out. Attorneys are 4 times more likely to use some kind of substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or drugs. And they need to learn how to turn it off so that they can continue to do what they do, because what they take on a day-to-day basis between, like just examples of what I saw my dad work on. My dad used to work in family law. So he was working with people through divorces, child custody battles. There was a while he took on some county cases. So he was actually doing he had a murder trial that was really hard. And this was the stuff he was doing on a day-to-day basis. So when he came home, he was shot a lot of the time, emotionally. And I know that it was a very big strain between my parents. I know it was a big strain on his ability to be there more often with us when we were kids, because my dad was always working. And I don't know an attorney, there's not many attorneys who work less than 60 hours a week.
Well, yeah, they have the whole billable hour thing and restraints, but I would imagine, given all that time, what you're really talking about, it was hard for your dad to be present.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you, it is the, the stress, the anxiety, the depression, and it depends on the fields they're in. I don't know that every attorney in every field feels that way, but a lot of people, and nobody feels bad for attorneys. I mean, there's no sob story out there about feeling bad for attorneys, but if you see what some attorneys take on, I mean, they are in the middle of somebody's worst time in their life. Mm. But it's not just that one client that they have at any given time. They may have, I mean, I spoke with an attorney the other day, and she's like, yeah, at the height of one of her hardest times, she had 300 open cases. Oh my gosh. Wow. So they're managing all these different things and having to keep all these balls in the air. And, it's this person's horrible case and this person's horrible case and this person's divorce and custody and molestation charge. I mean, like the underbelly of what people go through on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think that they get a lot of credit for some of the stuff they're working on, especially attorneys who are really trying to make a difference. There's a lot of people who are really trying to think about like immigration law, talk about some losing battles there. You're just trying to do the best you can. And then sometimes your client is the worst side of the I'll tell you something. When I went through my divorce, I had a little custody thing when it was all over, and I went back to our original attorney, and he said to me, I've been in this business 25 years, and yours is the worst divorce I ever handled. I met this guy in court, or he was up against him, and he said he was the biggest son of a bee I've ever gone up against, and you should go hire him. And I did. I remember my divorce. When I got divorced, my ex hired like one of the top female attorneys, which is always interesting. She was somebody who was pretty well known, and he always didn't show up. Like we would have mediations, he didn't show up, and she would be sitting there, and you could tell, like I know because I worked in a law office long enough, like it's embarrassing when your client's not there. And they're paying you. I mean, they got to pay you eventually anyway. Right. And I think that's another stress they go under too. Just because they're billing it doesn't mean they're getting paid. Well, yeah, that I think that would be very, very, very accurate, especially if you're a criminal attorney and you lose. Yes. I can't imagine your guy in jail is, paying you much. I was talking to, because I've been interviewing a lot of attorneys because I'm really kind of dialing down what some of the really big issues they come up against. And one of the gentlemen I spoke with recently, he worked in PI for a while, and he goes, it just was really difficult. He goes, because there's so many things I couldn't unsee. Oh, wow. And there's other attorneys who can sit down and they can look at a car, because he was doing wrongful deaths and stuff. And they can look at a car that had been burned and they're like, yep, this is going to be an awesome case because, it's going to, all the different things and looking ahead at what this case was going to bring. And he's sitting there and he's like, he can't get over the fact that there was a child in the car. Mm. And that's some of the stuff that happens on a day-to-day basis. I remember my dad had a client, and this woman had been brutally almost murdered, stabbed many times, and just had this horrible thing. And so all my dad was doing for her was a hearing to make sure the guy didn't get out of prison. Mm. But he still got the full case file that had pictures of the entire incident, and he still had to dive into the details of what had happened to this woman who had barely lived through this horrible attack. And I remember that kind of stuff all the time, and there's a lot of attorneys who are taking on that kind of stuff on a regular basis, and you see, and then, I mean, I don't think that anybody's ever looked at attorneys and seen the other side of that. They don't have, every movie out there on attorneys is not about what an attorney goes through. It's like them and them in the court being this superhero type of thing. It's not them going home and being like, I can't deal with life anymore. But that's the reality.
Wait. I just downloaded Michael McConnelly's new book. Are you telling me the Lincoln Lawyer isn't real? Man, I'm shattered. Matthew McConaughey isn't real. Okay. So how does meditation help them in these situations?
Well, meditation and breathing, it's about turning things off. It's about the fight or flight, right? So when you're under a certain amount of stress, and a certain amount of stress is healthy. I think that a lot of us, especially high-achieving people and attorneys, right, thrive on a certain level of stress. Like there's excitement that you get out of it, right? But there's a tipping point for that where it begins to create health problems, and it begins to cause anxiety and depression, and it also begins to take away from our physical health. It begins to add to health problems like high blood pressure. So that sympathetic nervous system, when the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, it's all the health issues that come with that. We get into that place that we can't heal, that our blood pressure increases. And when you do breathing techniques or you do meditation techniques, it actually clicks that off so that you can think better and be able to do things on a more functional basis. So one of them that I teach is really just so that people can go into a courtroom or they can go into a deposition and do one of these techniques before they walk into these places and calm and be able to think, because, it's like having to get on stage. That initial anxiety, it's turning that off so that you can walk in and do what you need to do and be able to think, because when you're under anxiety, your brain begins to shut down. You're just in survival mode. Mm-hmm. So, and then another part of that is being able to turn it off when somebody gets home so that they can be there with the people that mean the most to them, and also be able to go to bed at night. Yeah. That's another thing too. Like if you have something going on or you've had a really stressful day, it is hard to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I imagine there's a lot, I imagine it's similar to what police officers deal with on a regular basis and other stuff, but I just happen to focus on attorneys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would imagine for a lot of these guys, they are type A personalities, and even the thought of sitting there and doing something for 5 minutes is going to be really hard. Would you suggest that people start with something guided first, just to kind of get in and learn how to focus? Because it's really hard to shut down your brain sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I like the breathing techniques to start out. I think the meditation and the breathing have different benefits. My program's going to have some guided ones of different kinds, but one of the breathing techniques that is actually even new to me is we're breathing too deep and we're not breathing from the gut. So when I was initially teaching it, I was teaching more deep breathing, but one of the things they've been finding is that one of the biggest problems we have is that we're not getting enough carbon dioxide. So the problem with that is that the oxygen doesn't actually get into our cells. So breathing deeper doesn't get you more oxygen. It actually depletes you quicker. So the best way for people to breathe is actually breathing for, it's about 5.5 breaths per minute. And you're doing really slow breathing through your nose. Basically, everybody's a bunch of mouth breathers.
Yeah. And even at night, I know I sometimes I'll catch myself with my mouth open when I wake up and a dry throat. So is that like the Kundalini breath, or?
It's not a lot of this is different. One of the interesting things about this that they found is this kind of ties into a bunch of different yoga, meditation, and religious like mantras and things. They've actually tied it that when you're doing this type of breathing, it actually ties into all these very specific ones that have been done for centuries and ages, you know. And the reason they're finding that it's so beneficial is that the length of the breathing and the breathing through the nose is what creates immediately getting you into a parasympathetic state so that your body can heal and that your body can relax. And it begins to just turn off that stress signal.
Very nice. So do you, as first thing in the morning, is there a certain amount of number at times a day? Because I know some people do in the morning and before they go to bed at night.
The biggest thing I say about it is if you don't do it regularly, it's not going to be easy for you. You know, so you need to find some regularity with it, because when stress comes on, so there's, you know, we have our day to day, right? The more you practice something on a regular basis, and you should do it daily, whether you do it the morning, the evening, or the middle of the day isn't necessarily important as long as you're spending a certain amount of time doing it on a regular basis. But even 5 minutes a day can have a really big impact. So 5 minutes a day of controlled breathing to get yourself into a relaxed state. And the benefit of doing it regularly is the next time you have something really stressful come up, you can practice it again and you can get there quicker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's about having that relaxed state and having it a natural place that you go to. It's like going to the gym regularly. You know, it's a training. It's, if you had a dog and you never trained it and it just pees all over the house.
I have no idea where this is going, folks.
I love a good analogy. And it just pees all over the house and you just let it pee all over the house. It's never going to stop doing that. You have to regularly train the dog. The problem is that anybody in any profession can allow their brain and their minds to not be trained or to be trained in bad and negative habits.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about training better habits. If you don't train your brain to turn off occasionally and get into that parasympathetic state and that controlled breathing, the first few times you do it, it's going to be more difficult. But the more that you do it, the easier it becomes,
mm-hmm.
which is really important when you have a difficult situation come up, because it comes to you more easily because you've practiced it. It's just, so it flows.
Well, it's like any self-development tool. You have to practice it and become aware of when you have to use it. Right. So, you know, it is the same thing when you practice and then you become aware of, oh, I'm stressed. Okay, I need to take a minute and rebalance here. I think it's like any self-development tool that you use.
Right.
It doesn't, you know, those people who like read the book and then they don't practice it at all. Oh yeah, I know what's going on. I read that book. I didn't do any of the exercises in the back of the chapter, but yeah, I read it.
Yeah. It's like you have to put it into action. If you don't put it into action, then you're never going to get anything out of it, you know?
Exactly. So what did we get out of today's episode? Don't let your attorneys pee all over the house, right?
That's the takeaway.
Right. So when she promotes this, she's definitely not going to give it to the attorneys. No, I'm just kidding you. Brooke, where can we find you? It's always fabulous talking to you. You guys, if you knew us, we will call each other for one little question and it turns into like 2 hours of, you never know where it's going to go.
Every time. We're not brief. When we get on the phone, we definitely go down rabbit holes, but it's fun.
We do. So where can we find you?
You can always find me at 100 yearsofbliss.com. And then I'm on social media, LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I'm at 100yearsofbliss.com or Brooke Walker. But it is easier to find 100yearsofbliss.com than it is Brooke Walker, because apparently there's a lot of Brooke Walkers.
A lot of Brooke Walkers there. I know. That's the one thing about being a Juliet Clark. There are only 3 or 4 of us. So
nice.
And we're all writers. So yeah. So well, thank you so much for being on today. I think you guys all got your lessons out of this, and hopefully you got the right ones and not the one I told you at the end.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.